Hey there, YouTube. I'm Ikitsu. This is the Ikitsu Times. Welcome to my channel. Welcome to a little bit of Sins of Solar Empire 2. So today we're going to be talking about the Sova carrier. And like most carriers, it's an excellent ship for expanding with because its damage scales up really, really nicely against early game fights, against sort of smaller fights. But yeah, let's take a look at this thing's statistics there. So starting off, we got 500 durability, 1,650 shield points, 1,610 armor points. Those are really bad numbers. 4,585 hull points, which is a pretty good number, and then 270 antimatter. So this is a very fragile ship compared to most of the capitals that are being used by tech, and I would definitely not want this to be anywhere near the front lines. This is where its weaponry becomes a little bit unfortunate. One light autocannon with 6.7 damage per second at 100 pierce, and then two medium autocannons with 8 damage per second, each for a total of 16 damage per second at 200 pierce, and then 9-point defense autocannons at 4 damage per second each. They're autocannons for point defense. They don't really matter as far as damage goes, but it's 36 damage per second. Now, the guns here are not super long range ones, and that's a bit unfortunate because you don't want the Sova to be like straight up in combat. And unlike virtually every other variety of capital ship, this one doesn't have anything that's good against armor, like at all. It is entirely reliant on bombers for that, and the bombers are still only 300 pierce, so they can't really deal damage to capitals that effectively either. 8 damage per second from each squadron of bombers is not bad, but it's not like what you want out of that. So weapon arrangement for this thing, you've got the two mediums up here, and then you've got the light over here. From what I can tell, it will fire all three of these to a frontal target, so in spite of the fact that this gun should be getting shrouded by all this bullshit, it seems to operate just fine under those sort of conditions there. Guns down here, you're looking at a single point defense up here, 2 up here, 2 over here, and then 4 back here. This is not my favorite of the point defense arrays. I think that having the 4 topside ones be arranged here, 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 and here would be substantially smarter for this type of vessel. Or even having 2 here and then 2 up here would be substantially smarter. But they've decided that they're just going to have 4 plastered onto the back here like a bumper sticker. So why that is, I'm not entirely sure. It does have fairly good coverage from the front, though, just from these bottom ones. So, and then the additional one on top. This is enough that it's capable of swatting down a fairly good amount of missiles, but funny enough, I do think this is slightly better at taking out missiles broadside, which is a little bit odd. I wouldn't put this broadside just for that sake, though. In any event, let's take a look at their abilities. Oh, actually, hidden stats, forgot those. 75 armor strength, which is actually okay, and then 625 maximum speed, which is really bad. All the carriers are really slow in this game. So, immediately there's a couple things to note about this. Like all carriers, it's extremely fragile. Not capable of taking a substantial amount of hits. Its shield and armor points are quite bad, and has a good amount of hull points. That's kind of how all carriers work there. Antimatter of 270 is kind of average, and then its weapon complement is actually despicably low. Yeah, sure, it's gonna outdamage an Akan in practice, because the Akan can't actually get all its guns traversing forward, but it's kind of on par with a colony ship in terms of the damage it can do. What makes it actually stand up in terms of its damage is its fighters and its bombers and stuff like that, but you're kind of actually doing less damage than like Halcyon, for example, that's for sure. In any event, though, for its abilities here, Deploy Missile Battery, this is a very strong ability. It starts off with a 90-second cooldown. It goes down to 30 seconds at maximum value. 1,500 range is the deployable range. The missile itself has a much longer range after it starts firing. Antimatter cost is 75. I don't know why it has a build time label there. That's really irrelevant for this. It just instantly deploys it. That's, I guess, what the build time 0 is. And it has a duration of 120 seconds. So not only does the cooldown scale so that you can start dropping these every 30 seconds, making so you can have 4 of them out in the air at a sort of constant rotation, the ability of the missile battery itself increases, including its hit points, its damage that it deals, and the cooldown of the missiles that it fires, meaning that it gets 2 boosts to its damage. So not only are you capable of putting out like a decent number of these deployable missile batteries fairly effectively with this ship, those things scale up in terms of how much damage that they're doing in like multiple different ways. So this is a very, very good scaling ability. This is a very, very good ability to level up to full. At sort of the very earliest level, it's still a pretty good ability, especially because the deployable missile battery also has a point defense gun on it, so it's capable of shooting down even more fighters, more missiles. It also means that your point defenses are going to be a little bit. Your fighters and strike craft are going to have a little bit of an easier time because enemy point defenses are going to be shooting at those missiles, and the point defenses are going to be shooting down enemy fighters as well. So the deployable missile battery is an excellent ability that synergizes okay with the Sova as well. I think that this is probably the one that you're going to want to get most of the time with the Sova. Now, there are certain things that you can do with the other two abilities, but they're very fringe. Mass production is an ability that has a whopping 4-minute cooldown, which is huge. It takes forever to cast this. It has a 150 antimatter cost. It has a minus 15% scaling up to minus 45% build speed increase, meaning that you build ships and orbital structures really fast if you've got a Sova casting this around an area. Duration is what increases on this up to the point where it's basically got a nearly 100% uptime. I think it's like 75% uptime on this. It's pretty okay as far as that goes. I just really don't think that this is the best of abilities to put onto your capital ships. But if you're on a very cramped map where you know that you're not going to get enough factories, or you're trying to just get a base built under fire or something like that, this can be useful under those circumstances. It's just that these are sort of fringe situations that you shouldn't be designing like your battle strategy around doing. And in that case, like, mass production is just not really what you would want to have access to. Still, it can be good under certain circumstances there. Next is Mobile Corvette Factory, and this one you might notice doesn't have any sort of scaling to it. The way that this scales is at sort of first level, it lets you build corvettes out of your carrier at the normal sort of speed there. The second level, it reduces the build speed or build time by 15%, and then at third level, it decreases that by 40%. So the result of this is that if you go for like Mobile Corvette Factory 1, you could just go for mass production up to 3, but then you'd have to get 4 levels to get like the 45% drop on build speed there. Whereas if you just go Mobile Corvette Factory 3, you can get to minus 40% just for the Corvettes. So it really depends on what your priorities are and how you're planning on building this. Now, for me, the Sova was never really what I would pick for Mobile Corvette Factories in the previous iteration of this, because I just didn't like the Shriken. Now, I think the Shriken might have been fixed, which makes it a situational ship instead of a trash ship, like it was before. I think it's still pretty bad. I still haven't figured out how to use them properly, but hypothetically, you could use them now. The more important thing is that they've added the Stylat, and the Stylat is a pretty decent ship for a lot of sort of circumstances. So if you want to get Mobile Corvette Factory and just sort of dump out a bunch of Stylats in a position where they can quickly wipe out a couple buildings or something like that because they've got fairly good armor-piercing damage, then you can use them for that purpose, and that's like a perfectly acceptable raiding strategy where you just have a Sova like lingering with an asteroid going into the enemy's backline, dumping that sort of off, and then having them suddenly build a whole bunch of Stylats that just blow up a couple of buildings before eventually they sort of get caught maybe or something like that. But there's a couple of reasons why that sort of works, but we'll get into that later. So Mobile Corvette Factory, I think, is substantially stronger now than it used to be, just because you've got access to more types of Corvettes that are more flexible, making it so you can do more things with them. The next ability is your Rapid Manufacturing. Cooldown is a whopping 6 minutes with a 150 antimatter cost. What this does is it lets you instantly crap out an extra 25 strike craft, which is about 6 squadrons of bombers, for a duration of 180 seconds. The only reason I don't really like this is that its cooldown is so long, but if you have a whole bunch of Sovas, this can be a like battle swinging difference in terms of like how many extra strike craft you're getting. Like, let's say you're getting bodied by a bunch of Halcyons or whatever because they've just been cycling their shields. If you have a bunch of Sovas and you're fighting a bunch of Halcyons with that, you can just suddenly deploy an overwhelming mass of fighters where you're getting like that extra damage per second, whereas the Halcyons are only giving their ships extra hit points, which means that you can sort of like potentially win that grinding fight there by blitzing them with the Rapid Manufacturing ability. Still, you're not likely to get like a whole ton of Sovas that all have Rapid Manufacturing on them, so I wouldn't rely on this too much. I don't think that it's a great ability. I wish it had a much shorter cooldown, but a lower duration. Maybe a lower antimatter cost. Like, if it lasted for 60 seconds and it was a real blitz sort of ability, but it had a cooldown of only 2 minutes or something like that. I don't know how you would work that, though, because you have to worry about those fighters actually making it to their target as well. So there are some reasons why I think that this is probably best left as is. So This is kind of also the only ability that's directly a carrier-related ability, which is sort of a theme for everything except the Halcyon. Carriers just do not focus in on the carrier aspect very well. Still, though, pretty decent abilities all around there. It's a flexible ship that can do some weird things, and you're gonna sort of have to get creative about how you want to use those abilities. I don't think that I would ever think of the Sova carrier as a pure carrier, though. That's not really where its strength lies. It's gonna be doing the deployable missile battery thing, or it's going to be doing some sort of weird build construction sort of thing there. So let's take a look at the ways that we would build this. So first of all is if we go for deployable missile battery as our primary, which is I think how you're going to do it most of the time. You would obviously be leveling this up maximum, but what I would do after that is I would either get mass production up to 2, or I would get mobile Corvette factory up to 2, and this is before we hit level 6. And I would take Mobile Corvette Factory if I wanted to have the ability to build some enemy ships while we're pushed into deep enemy territory, where I feel like I do need to be able to keep reinforcing things from right up there fairly quickly. Mobile Corvette Factory, even if it's only up to 2, allows you to sort of do that in a pinch where you feel like that's something that you need to do. Meanwhile, your ship is going to be focusing on its carrier capacity and on its deployable missile batteries, but not on its guns or anything like that. You should never be focusing on the guns with the Sova. The other option is you go for the deployable missile battery as the primary and then get mass production. This is going to be the more defensive option. You would have mass production if you wanted to like have this thing hanging out in your gravity well with one of your planets, where you're trying to build up a bunch of defenses, and you want to also have like reinforcements streaming in from factories that are nearby. This is capable of increasing that. It's also okay if you push into an enemy territory, you take their planet, and then you suddenly want to build a bunch of defenses really, really quickly so that you can defend that planet against the enemy counterattack if that's what's coming in there. So there's a couple different ways that you could do the deployable missile battery build, but unfortunately I don't think any of them are great as far as itemization goes. All 3 of the builds, I would definitely recommend getting the reserve squadron hangar. This lets you sort of catch up a little bit with the Halcyon. For defenses, I would only ever get the combat repair system. You don't have a ton of shields or anything like that, or armor, so being able to like repair all of that hull regeneration is going to matter a lot, and you're going to probably be taking hull damage faster with this thing. Now, there are reasons to take the ablative armor and the reactive plating. If you're really getting hammered by either of these types of weapons, this does apply that resistance to your hull. However, a blade of armor is going to be more important in this case than reactive plating, because this thing does have a lot of point defenses on it. If you're at the point where you have to get reactive plating and you have to get flak burst onto a Sova, you really ought to think about just getting a lot of Gardas at that point in time, because you're kind of beyond the pale of what you should be needing there. I do think that antimatter engine, by the time that you get to deployable missile battery level 3 in particular, you're going to really want to have antimatter engines on this thing. It's kind of mandatory because when you get this down to a 30-second cooldown, you're still chucking out a deployable missile battery every 30 seconds for 75 antimatter, which is still pretty expensive. So definitely going to recommend taking that on this thing. That's about the only thing that I'd say is necessary. If you want, you could try to take something like targeting array. I don't think that works perfectly with this thing. There's other ships I think that benefit more from it. I would actually just micro to keep this thing in your backline and keep it away from the enemy ships if at all possible. There's a fringe case of taking the rapid autoloader with this build. The reason is that the rapid autoloader does disproportionately benefit your point defenses. Like, you see a really big missile wave incoming, you hit the rapid autoloader's active, minus 80% to your physical weapon reload means your point defense guns are firing almost twice as fast, which is really, really good for point defenses, because firing faster for point defenses is better than higher damage per second. So there is a fringe case for rapid autoloader on the Sovas. I don't think that you should be, again, doing that. By the time you're at the point where you've got, like, say, let's say that you have, like, flak burst, you've got rapid autoloader, and you've got, like, reactive plating, and then you've got the antimatter engines, just so that you can fight, like, enemy point defenses, or you've got, like, enough point defense to, like, take out an unlimited amount of missiles. You should really just be building Gardas, especially because you get more point defense from the deployable missile battery as well. That has got some point defense on it as well. So I don't think that you would ever want that particular type of build. You could theoretically get the missile guidance computer. I, again, don't think that this is really the right ship for it necessarily, but if you ended up in a situation where you just don't need to put the other things on there, especially hopefully those defensive modules, you could put this onto your Sova. You're probably going to put it on a Marza, is my opinion, but I think that's just, theming bias in my brain there. It's still okay on the Sova because it's still a backline sort of ship there. So what we're probably going to want to do for this thing is set it to engage in hold position. And what that'll do is it'll make it so that it'll just sort of like make it so that it doesn't move towards enemies. This can be awkward in certain circumstances, but you probably want this thing on hold position so it can't attack the enemy. You just want to position it for its point defense guns to be firing. So the other build that we could talk about here, we go with the Mobile Corvette Factory, and then we get like 3 levels of mass production. And another level of Mobile Corvette Factory. And this is a build where we would just be crapping out craft as fast as possible here. In this particular case, we're definitely going for just backline support. We're not trying to fight with this thing. We still probably want the Reserve Squadron Hangar, because that provides a pretty tremendous amount of extra damage from this thing. This is a case where Missile Guidance Computer would be more sensible. Something like the Targeting Ray would be more sensible. You just keep it in the backline with these abilities running. And you don't even need the antimatter engine. You could instead get the volatile accelerants and make this your volatile accelerant ship. Now, I'm not even sure that your opponent would look at this, though, and say that it's worth prioritizing, because they're just going to XP farm your like Corvettes, probably, unless they really have trouble with like dealing with them. But you can get to the point where you're producing Corvettes extremely quickly using this strategy. If you're in an enemy territory and you're just churning out Corvettes, you can actually just sort of potentially turn a fight by using that. So I think that there's something to be said for this. It also provides some flexibility, like mass production, letting you sort of take that planet or whatever and just making it so that you're absolutely dominating in terms of like production speed, because you're able to sort of get up your orbital structures, your orbital defenses like really, really quickly, and make it so that you've got like a fleet that is ready to intercept your opponent on the counterattack. So it's hard to counterattack into you at that point in time. I think that that could be a very viable strategy. I think that there's also an interesting thing, like this is the build you would do if you wanted to like just have a Sova in an asteroid that's sort of traveling on the outsides, because you get into your opponent's territory and you see that they don't have enough defenses there. You could just drop like 20 stylets in a heartbeat. And the reason that you do this instead of like having your carrier, instead of having just 200 stylets in the back line on that asteroid, is that if your opponent decides to attack you, you're down 200 supply or whatever. Whereas if you just have the Sova in sort of the back line doing this, you can sort of peek your head out and see it's like, okay, my opponent doesn't have any defenses here. I can sort of commit. But, you know, you're only down 50 supply if your opponent decides to fight you. Whereas if you've got the 200 ships in there, then you're down 200 supply or whatever. When your opponent decides to actually fight you, you're much more likely to get really badly rolled in a fight because you're behind by a lot more. So I think that this makes for an interesting raiding option, but it's still kind of risky because you are down a capital in your main fight there. That's kind of like the only real builds of this. It's either going to be production focused with the mass production going up, because I think that if you're going for Mobile Corvette Factory and mass production as a combo, you kind of go for mass production as the higher one since it has the better ship build time bonuses, and you go with just the one of Mobile Corvette Factory until later. And what you'll end up with is like a more flexible, faster build time, because you're not saving the you don't need the antimatter for anything else when you're doing this, really. So, yeah, I think that that works out okay. Now, let's take a look at the techs that are sort of relevant to this guy here. Now, obviously, being able to access both the Shuriken and the Stylet is important for this, as is the Enhanced Light Thruster, because you're capable of constructing these. The better these things operate, the better you're going to be able to use your capital for that purpose there. Now, I do also think that this is a ship that benefits disproportionately from the military-grade rounds and the missiles, not just because, again, the Shuriken and the Stylet use those, but because your missile deployables use those, your bombers use those, and your fighters use these, and your ship itself uses these, and the point defenses on the deployable missile use these. So virtually everything you do gains big benefits from all of these sort of bonuses here. So I do think that your Sova is definitely going to want the weapon upgrades. The armor upgrades are going to matter a lot less. Your armor values are quite low. You're still going to want them, but they're not going to help you out anywhere near as much as with your other capitals. You're going to want that advanced maneuvering. Getting this thing out of a bad situation is rough as it is because it's a fairly slow ship there. So 35% faster turn speed does help with this. As far as like its actual defenses go, fortified superstructure is where it's at. Having expert damage control combined with the combat repair system would be actually a pretty good way to keep this thing alive under pretty bad situations. So I do think that the expert damage control has a place for this ship here. Efficient generators and potent reactor chaining is going to be quite good for this because, again, it can easily blow through its antimatter if it's going for the missile deployable build. Antimatter engine as well for that purpose. I think that uniquely amongst the capital ships, this is probably one of the worst ones for the backup shield generator. It's still likely to be able to kick in, but you don't get very much shields off of this thing. And your armor is quite low and you're quite fragile in general, so you're less likely to get an activation of the shield burst from this ship, and it's not going to matter even if it does activate, because it's going to just restore 50% of your shields, and then you're just going to lose them again. You're going to just go down very, very quickly after that anyway. So same thing for the enhanced shield cohesion and the improved shield raise and the superior shield emitters. None of this is going to really save the Sova carrier as much as being able to just have more hit points and having the combat repair system. In my opinion, I think that that's the best way to keep this thing alive. Now, this thing also has more synergy with the civilian tree. Counter deployment, as far as I understand it, does work with this thing, giving you that 50% reduced ship build time as long as an enemy ship is in a gravity well. If you're pushing your Sovas into enemy territory, that counts. So you could be building your corvettes extremely, extremely fast thanks to this. I think labor negotiations also works, but the industrial complex obviously does not. That's a planet item. So you don't get the factory unit build times on that, but the labor negotiations and the industrial juggernaut will increase your build times as well. I think that by the time you're doing industrial juggernaut, your corvettes really should not be a relevant part of it, but the fact that you can get them and the fact that they're just something you could instantly have essentially does make it useful. Now, as far as I understand it, don't actually think that you can stack these to get minus 100% and instantly build stuff. I think the way that it works, it's it halves the build time or something like that. There's janky math in how that's actually resolved. Now, you're also going to have access to your culture bonuses for your bonus speed. That's going to make it so that you're capable of running around a little bit faster. But yeah, that's pretty much everything that there is to say about this thing. I think that it's got some interesting potential, and there's some experimental things that you could do with the construction abilities that I haven't really thought about or really don't know about, but I think that there's a lot of weird potential there. As far as actually just fighting goes, it's got good carrier capacity, the fighters that the tech faction have access to, and especially once you've got the reserve squadron hangars, are quite good at they're quite high performing for their cost and everything like that, so you can get a lot out of them. So I think that the Sova carrier is probably one of the better ways to do carriers if you're playing as tech as compared to actually building their Percherons. The fact that it costs so much more and the fact that you need levels before it really scales into being better than the Percherons, though, does hurt it. So try it out. I think that you'll be really happy expanding using this thing, especially if you enter into a province where there's 10 Javelises or whatever, and your coal would normally gets ass kicked, which does happen. You could be definitely in a situation where you pop into a system and it's just got lots of Javelises that you have to clear through, and it does a ton of damage to you. I find that very common. The Sova is very good in those situations. So in any event, though, that is going to be everything for today. Hope you found this one enjoyable, and of course, as always, hope to see you guys all next time.